All right, let's dig into all things Super Bowl here. I want to start with the quarterbacks. We've had a lot of quarterback conversations this season. This is the culmination of all of that. I don't think you can take two guys in more disparate situations than Patrick Mahomes and Brock Purdy. Patrick Mahomes is a first-round pick. He's won multiple MVPs, trying to win his third Super Bowl. I think is objectively the best player and best quarterback in the NFL. And you have Mr. Irrelevant on the other side, a guy whose value to his team, standing within his own team, has been debated ad nauseum here over the entire season. What about this quarterback matchup interests you the most?
Well, I was an NFL Network opening night last night, and we did 3 shows, total access show, and we had to watch. We got to watch the entire Super Bowl opening night. And I thought it was awesome that the thing that stood out to me was when the teams were up on the stage together with Scott Hansen, like the very first thing that they did when they were together. And, Purdy is over there, like 7th round pick, Mr. Irrelevant, and just like taking it all in, like Mr. All-American, all of his answers. I mean, like what he said too, like life isn't about you. It's about being a part of something bigger than yourself. Like that whole quote to me was like awesome. Like, how do you not love this guy right now with everything that he's doing? And then just in the background, like they went to Purdy first, just in the background is Patrick Mahomes just lurking and got that smile on his face. Like, man, you got no idea what's in store for you. Like that was the best moment of the night because we all said it, like the analysts up there that we were talking about. And I'm just like, oh man, like Purdy just is glad he's here. Mahomes is like, I'm going to freaking cut you down, man. Like you could just tell, but like Mahomes is nice and everything and all that stuff. And look, it's just 2 completely different ways, like you said, on how to get here. Mahomes is without a doubt, like, especially if he wins this, is in the running for the greatest quarterback of all time. And he's only played 7 seasons, right? 6 straight AFC championship. You can just list the superlatives. And then you have Brock Purdy, back-to-back NFC championship games, but Mr. Irrelevant, and he was their 3rd-string quarterback. And I thought it was so fascinating how Kyle Shanahan last night, after having a few pops in his system, he got a little bit open with everyone. And he was able to say to us and talk about the game manager tag, in my opinion. And I thought his quote was awesome because he was like, listen, guys, he was like, finally some fire under him and talking about Brock Purdy. Like, listen, I love that my quarterback's a game manager. I actually want game managers because 1, you got to be able to manage the game. 2, you got to be able to run the system that you're asked to run. And if you can't, you're going to be on your way out. And 3, you got to make plays when all that other stuff breaks down. And he said, if you don't do those 3 things, you're going to find yourself on the outs. And whether that's 2 games or 2 years or whatever it is. And he's like, Brock does them all. And that's exactly what I want out of my quarterback. So I really feel like he's finally got his guy. Like he had Matt Ryan in Atlanta with the OC, 28-3. That's been well documented. He had Jimmy Garoppolo 2019. They had a 10-point lead with 8 minutes left in the game. And then he finally gets to, I think, someone that he really trusts to run the offense. And, they're going to have their hands full. And then you go to the other side with Patrick Mahomes. It's just like, what else do you want me to say? Like the best player in the world is getting better. And he's gotten better as the season's progressed, which is really scary for teams.
Yes.
And so it's just something that you look at and it's like, I feel like you're going to look back on this Super Bowl in 5 years and you're going to be like, man, like Mahomes versus Purdy. And then I think you're really going to see Purdy ascend. I don't know if he's going to ever be on the level. I mean, he won't be on the level of Patrick Mahomes, but I think we talked about this and you asked me maybe a month or 2 ago. No, maybe like 2 or 3 months ago in October when Purdy was rolling.
Yeah, it was early. It was probably about halfway through the season, maybe not even.
It was early. And you asked me, you said, would you be okay paying Purdy? And I was like, I don't know. And now I'm like, yeah, I would. Like he's proven himself to me that he can run a franchise. Yes, he has great players. Yes, he's a game manager and Kyle Shanahan. That's exactly what he wants. And so if Kyle Shanahan, John Lynch are going to be around, like I would expect Purdy to get paid. And he's got another year. They got him on a rookie contract for another year. They don't have to re-up him until after next year. But just such an interesting dynamic. And another thing too, and I know we'll probably get to this, but I did want to hit, because I was looking at this, I was like, I love these questions, is I don't think even if Brock Purdy wins the Super Bowl, that he's going to stop getting hate. Like, I feel like he's going to continue to get hate his entire career. Like, I like you're telling me that our haters going to be out in droves if he wins a Super Bowl. And I'm going to say, yes, they're still going to find a way to pick him apart. And I think he's just got such a really good demeanor about himself.
So I want to talk about this on a couple different levels. One, the game manager thing. The game manager tag is wrong. Even if you are a detractor of Brock Purdy, the detraction shouldn't be that he's a game manager, because he's not. That's not what he is. His selling point is that he's actually making plays outside of what the offense is presenting to him. Jimmy Garoppolo was a game manager. There's a lot of underneath throws, a lot of stuff that was on schedule, very little outside of the structure of the offense. Brock Purdy is not a game manager. He's more aggressive. He's pushed the ball down the field. The work he's done as a scrambler is a selling point. If you're going to take away from what Brock Purdy is, calling him a game manager is wrong. Pointing to the help that he has, that is potentially correct. It's how much help he has compared to how much help other great quarterbacks, including Patrick Mahomes, have from a pass catching and offensive structure standpoint. My biggest thing here is when you look at these two guys and you look at the way these teams are built, you have a quarterback at the top of the sport that's getting paid at the top of the sport, and you have a guy that's making absolutely nothing. So you have two different team building propositions. You can build it around the quarterback and have to skimp in certain areas and understand, okay, the quarterback is going to lift the weaknesses in other areas of our roster. On the 49ers side of it, you have, okay, the quarterback is making nothing, so we can build a super team around the quarterback. So they're very different builds and very different philosophies. So now we get to a point in the playoffs where you get to answer the question, can you win that way? Can you have a quarterback who is sort of a role player within the team? Or do game plans and approaches from opposing defenses get so focused on making that guy beat you in the postseason that it's actually really hard when you build your team that way? And that's why I think the game plans from the Packers and the Lions have been so interesting. Because for me, when I'm looking at this and I think about the Niners offense in general, my first thought is I'd rather lose 4.5 yards a carry at a time than let them dice me up with explosive plays. So I'd rather play with lighter boxes, kind of tempt them into running the ball consistently rather than loading it up and allowing them to throw the ball. What's funny, though, is that both of the teams that they've played in the playoffs have not done that. They have loaded it up. They have played with base defense, and they brought a lot of pressures with the Packers. It was these 5-0 looks. So they have tempted Brock Purdy to beat them, and it has been a mixed bag. He's played well in some stretches. He's made enough plays, but he hasn't played his best football. So I think that, to me, is the most interesting part about this entire game, is that the Chiefs do the same thing, and the Chiefs are the best defense that they will have played in the playoffs. Is this going to be enough? Where if your quarterback is just sort of another guy on the roster, when we get to the highest stage against a really good defense and they're focused on making him beat you, can he do it? And I think that is the biggest question entering this game for me.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. But if you look at Brock through the playoff games, like obviously bye week, then rust in the first half against Green Bay led him back to a victory against Green Bay in the second half. Start of the Detroit Lions game, he was awful in the first half, like too many nerves. And then he was 14-16, 170 and touchdown in the second half. So it's like the battle of halves for me. He's got to figure out a way. And we talked about this a little bit on NFL Network last night. He's got to find a way to start fast. And whether that's a first 15 script, whether that's screens to Debo, whether that's bootlegs, whether that's under center runs, which the Chiefs struggle in. They're the fourth worst defense in all of the NFL, giving up under center runs. They've given up over 1,900 yards under center. So I imagine that Kyle Shanahan understands that, hey, Brock needs to feel himself into this game. Okay. And so I imagine that they're going to go 22 personnel, 2 backs, 2 tight ends, and 13 personnel and get Chiefs and big people. Because Spags in general, over the last 3 or 4 years, his whole menu, when you're facing 22 personnel or 13 personnel on offense, it shrinks. It shrinks. Not as much pressure, more coverage, less ways to skin the cat is like what he used to say, like, hey, if they're playing heavy personnel, we just want to play 1 or 2 coverages and we're going to have 1 or 2 blitzes. So I can imagine that early in the game to let Purdy get settled, to also protect that right side of the offensive line. Really, the center from the right side has been not good at all. And that's the biggest thing with this top 5 pass defense from the Chiefs is I think that the key of the game is going to be how can Spags affect that right side of the 49ers offensive line? Is it from pressure? Is it from secondary pressure, like the double edge stuff? Is it from 4-man front? Is it from overloading that side to make sure those three are one-on-one at all times? Is it from chipping and thumping on each side, which this 49ers do a decent amount of, but they like to get an empty a lot. And I just can't imagine, other than some quick game, that they're going to leave these 5 offensive linemen, really, Trent Williams can do your thing, really the 4 offensive linemen just alone on island. So it'll be interesting to see how he comes out with these first 15, because Shanahan is a really good first 15 scripter. And because that the halftime is a lot longer, I would expect him to have a first 15 in the second half as well, because halftime's almost twice as long. We did it in New Orleans. We went into the locker room and we took our pads off because it's like 20-25 minute long halftime. We reinstalled another first 15 script in 2009, and we went out and obviously everyone knows that we won that game, but we played a lot better in the second half. So it's going to be, in my opinion, come down to how Cal Shanahan handles that right side of the offensive line for himself.
I think that's a great point. And if you look at the way the Lions did it, it was a lot of overload pressures. There was a lot of 5-man fronts, a lot of guys mugged up. I mean, they were not afraid to blitz. And I think that the Chiefs are going to be the exact same way, even if it's fewer blitz looks, fewer pressure looks that they can get into out of that heavy personnel, because that's what the Chiefs have done. They've matched those big bodies with big bodies consistently. And I think that we're going to see a very similar approach.